You're on a mission to expand love and freedom in the world, well, within yourself, which ultimately and subsequently leads into the world. Walk me through the moment that you knew that was the path that was meant for you.
Yeah. Did this exercise with my friend Talia Jacqueline, dear friend of mine. And she asked me to list out all of my values, the most important values to me. And values that ended up being at the top were love, freedom, God, and expansion. And so expand love and freedom came about as a result of doing that exercise, really sitting with an important thing to me. And if I just put that in my bio, if I just live with that essence, how good could my life get?
Let me play devil's advocate for just a second on
Please
it.
do it.
And we have very similar beliefs in a lot of things as we've uncovered. So I think a lot of what I want to do today is play devil's advocate so that we can expand upon certain similarities that we share. How or where in the pecking order of values does health come?
Love is loving your body, loving your mind, loving your spirit. So when I say love, to me, I can't fully love myself or love another if I'm not looking after my body.
So it's one and of the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that love is a value that you've cultivated, or that was something that was instilled from an early age?
I think both. I think that there were periods of my life that I really did not love myself at all. And reading the book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It, really changed a lot for me. I would write over and over again, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. Look in the mirror for 5 minutes straight. Say, I love myself, I love myself. What that does to see what that did for me was it made me feel more love for myself. But I also had the baseline of a dad who really cared about me and a mom who really listened to me and a grandma and grandpa who just wanted me to thrive and succeed. So my baseline was great, and I also didn't fully love myself with that amazing baseline. So
why do you think that is?
I think because that's the human condition. I think even if you were given love and love poured into you, there will be some part of you that feels insufficient in some way. It's like, oh, I was loved too much. Is that real? Or like, we'll make up any excuse not to love ourselves.
Why do you think that so if that's the human condition, why do you think that that is our innate trait in order to sabotage or alter the things that were given to us freely?
I don't quite understand.
So if you were born into love, and I believe we're born into a perfect state, which is love, if you say the human condition is to question if that's what is actually meant for us, or if we are deserving of that level of love, why do you think we alter that? Or why do you think you shifted that rather than accepting that from day one?
I think because there also, for me, was a subtext of if I want to be happy. I was 13 years old writing a time management blog about how to be a happier human called Command Your Time, right? Like, it's in me deeply to want to expand my own love and other people's love. And I don't think that's the case for everyone, but I know for me, it just a sense of I'm here to help myself and others be happier. What other 13-year-olds are writing blogs like that? So it was part of my calling to do so.
We spoke earlier today about defining the difference in feeling and defining the difference in words, and trying to get to a common ground of where what I'm saying is the same thing as what you're feeling and vice versa. So we have this shared vocabulary. As it relates to love, how would you define what love is, or how does it manifest or show up within you?
I think it's the connection with another human being and the full deepness of wanting the best for another human being and the actions that accompany that. So, for example, we stayed here. I stayed here. I say we, like me and someone else. Like I stayed here. You were so kind to bless me with a place to stay in January. And I sent you a book or a couple of books, whatever, as a way to thank you. That's me, you showing me love as a way to give me a place to stay. I show you love because I'm grateful for your company and everything you've given me in terms of a place to stay. So I think it's connecting to another human being. And we could do that by doing research on somebody if they're a podcast guest, or we could do that by hearing what somebody says and actually feeling it in your body and embodying that. I think love manifests in so many different ways, but today I got in the Uber driver loved the smell of my coffee. And I was like, hey, do you want me to go grab you one? And he's like, oh my God, yes, that's me in that moment loving him, right? So I think it feels so good to be loved, and it manifests in so many different ways. And I think that if you just ask yourself, how could I insert a little more love into this situation? How could I think about the other person a little bit more? That's what love is to me.
How much of it, because I'm expanding upon the belief around love too, and it's something that I've been wanting to cultivate more of, and that's kind of a trajectory that I want to take the podcast today at some point too. I think that on one hand, you can only fully experience that which you allow yourself to feel. And then on the other hand, you say love is you fully connecting with another individual.
Yeah.
Where do you feel the trade-off is, if there is one, in the way I think about it presently is I need to cultivate a sense of love within myself so that I can fill the cup and then be able to give to others. Do you view that similarly, or how do you view the element of cultivating and creating more love so that you can give and share more of it?
Yeah, if your cup is overflowing, then you're naturally going to share more and it's going to deepen. But I do think a mother who's broken can give love to a child. I really do think that. And I think so often we come from this place of, oh, I'm not whole, so I can't give love. That's fully true. I think loving others is how you become more whole, and helping someone else and thinking about someone else. But I do absolutely know that I feel the most love for myself. And when I'm in that place, I'm asking the Uber driver if he wants a coffee. I'm thinking about other people more when I fully am good with me. So I think cultivating that within oneself is really important. And making your cup overflowing is such an exciting part of life. If anyone gets to that point, it's like everything else you do is extra because you're good with you.
Walk me through the process of what it looks like for you to cultivate that love within yourself.
Daily practice. It's a daily practice of figuring out where I'm not free and opening myself up to the places I'm not loving myself. But if I really were to think about it, it would be meditating often. Meditation is the core practice, which I haven't meditated today, but it's when I'm in the state of meditation, you're pouring attention and love into yourself. Like, we're scrolling on these social media apps, and Mark Zuckerberg knows your attention is valuable. Elon Musk knows your attention is valuable. Know your attention is valuable? If you really did know that, you would spend time with yourself. I'm saying that to myself as somebody who didn't meditate this morning, right? So I think spending time with yourself is the number one way to love yourself. And, I was talking to a coaching client, and they were saying, I do all these things for other people, for my boyfriend and for my dog and for my mom and for my dad. It's like, where's the time for you, right? That's baseline for loving oneself, because you need time to reflect. You need time to understand. You don't understand yourself. How can you love yourself? And I think that when we are in the place of spending time with ourselves, we are likely to love ourselves fully. And that's the practice for me.
And when you love yourself fully, you're able to then give love to others, which is the way you choose and desire to show up in the world.
Your place coming from, I don't need you to do anything for me to be okay because I'm good with me. Like, I love you fully. Absolutely. Whether you smoked my ass on this run that we did earlier, but it's like, I don't need you to run a certain time for me to love you. Versus sometimes people have this, like a high school coach. It's like, I will only love you if you do this.
The conditionalness. And I think relating back to the human condition, I think from my own experience and my own upbringing, which is what I'm speaking from, I think the conditionalness is something that is taught to us in a Western commercialized society because we believe, at least I did, that when I achieved a certain thing, I would get the love that I wanted, but it was always love from someone else, never from myself. So it wasn't an unconditional, I love me because of who I am, and I love me for being, not for doing. And it's a very big distinction between showing up and being able to express love just as you are, regardless of what the act it is that you're in. So whether we're running, whether we're meditating, whether we're in business together, whether we're friends, whether we're a stranger on the street or an Uber driver, you can show up loving because you're not trying to get something from someone. Where or why? I would say why is probably the better avenue to take, or that I'm most interested in. Why do you think that love stems from transaction, or we believe that love comes from a transactional place, when the most loving act someone can do is to create, and that's where we come from?
Yes. I don't know, man. It's a great question. Actually, talking to a really spiritual guy, and he's like, if someone so hard because killed somebody close to you, how could you get to that place of unconditional love for that person?
Do you believe you must?
No, I don't believe you must, but I believe that's your opportunity for growth if you're in that position. And that's another level, right?
So boiled down to the root, all expansion comes from learning to love unconditionally.
And then learning to be at peace completely.
Which comes from your acceptance?
It comes from pure love, unconditionally, for the present moment, exactly as it is.
So walk me through how you think of the process of getting to that place.
Look at every place in your life that you're not at peace with. Like, if you want a certain outcome, if you want life to be a certain way for you to be okay, if it's literally just you at a traffic light, if it's this from the smallest to the biggest, they all, and becoming aware of that is the game. Becoming aware of where am I not at peace? Happen for me to be okay.
I find it interesting you looked at the number. That was written by Joey.
Love that.
Day one, when we had the first guest. And I think you can be at peace yet still strive.
Sure.
And I believe that for me personally, I used to define success differently. I used to define success as obtaining this goal, but it was always a goal that was being perpetually pushed down to a further and further place. And when I got the thing, there was another thing that I would want. And the reframe or the redefining of success for me now is continually striving for more without sacrificing the present. Because I want to grow and do and achieve and get and I am so lit up by competition. Like, yeah, we're running this morning, and then you're smoking me. I'm like, oh, we're gonna get him on the back half.
You did, and you definitely did.
And that I get lit up by that. But if I'm not able to be present in that moment because of, that's where I believe things become a problem, because you're pulling yourself out of the only moment that you truly do have, as cliche as we think it sounds, it is. And in doing so, you're not able to fully enjoy and embody that because of something else that you have that you need to become or do or get. It's fascinating to me to see the different evolutions of my own life, because without those places of me trying to strive to and get to, I wouldn't have gotten to the place where I'm able to now sit and say, this is the most important thing to me, whether I'm able to do it every single day or not and live presently. If I didn't have those moments of non-presence or the inability in that moment to become present because something else was driving me forward, where would I be now? And what would life look like ulteriorly? And it's an interesting thought process to play with, because we said earlier too, imagine if all of the thing, like imagine if we just accepted in day one. We woke up, we were born, we went through life, and we said, I accept love as I am. Where would we be now? How do you know? There's no way to know. But it's an interesting thought experiment that we briefly touched on earlier today.
Yeah. I mean, from my present day experience, my life is a miracle. And so I think if you genuinely live in love, your life becomes a miracle. Genuinely live in peace, there's no other option that can occur. The things that happen in your life don't make sense to the rational mind. Because you're living in love, is you're living in peace. Every action you take is with the highest good for as many humans as possibly can. So you're just like, so you are blessed with situations that unfold that don't make sense to the rational mind over and over and over and over again.
You've had quite an evolution yourself. When was the moment that you recognized that this love path, this transition, this pivot was the next step in that evolutionary process for you?
I mean, I went on these walks with my friend L Beecher, and it was July or August of 2023. Saw all the places that I needed to be okay for me to be happy. And I was doing well in life. Like, I was feeling good. Things were solid. But I had this mission of 1 million downloads per month for my podcast. I had subtle little strings of resentment for my parents. I had a non-understanding of myself in how I was best presenting with people. Meaning, like, one insight that Elle gave me was, your medium is not podcasting or audio, it's live. Meaning, like, whenever you are with somebody, they feel differently, which is not true for everyone. Some people are best on video. Some people are best on audio. Some people are best in writing. I am, from what she explained to me, I am best in live. And I've seen that to be true. And so there were a lot of tweaks that were made, but it started with those walks randomly, quote unquote, randomly bumping in to this incredible woman named Elle, who was able to help uncover so many of my own insecurities, limiting beliefs, and things that weren't correct about how I was viewing the world. And I was helping her in the same way. And it was just such a beautiful friendship that happened serendipitously, but also felt like it was meant to happen to ignite this stage of growth for me.
Everything happens as is meant to and happens for a reason. So I think the coincidence and serendipitous is irrelevant because it happened for you. Did you feel unfulfilled or that there was something else in your life that you were meant to do leading up to that point?
No, I thought the podcast was what I was going to sell out Madison Square Garden for a live podcast, and I'm still open to that possibility. But
it would be your guest.
It would be I envisioned 10 different guests on the stage or more than just one. But it's like, it's a dream that I let go of because I don't need that to be okay. And even though I would say that I didn't need it to be okay back then, the truth was the deepest truth was that I did. And that I wanted to be recognized and seen as that person. And today, I'm good posting 1 episode a week. I'm good posting none a week. I'm good posting 3. There's a lot more freedom in how I can be. And that's resulted in less downloads for the podcast. But that's also, I'm just happy. I'm good. I'm at peace, with whatever it is. And the podcast could explode and it could do nothing. And I'm good either way.
So the external outcome is irrelevant of the internal accomplishment.
Yeah.
Is there something you're working towards or striving for?
Yeah, I'm working to help give people the feeling that's in my heart.
You want to replicate what this is for you.
Yeah, I have such deep peace for myself and such love for myself and this energy of just pure, that feeling. You know that feeling when you feel so deeply relaxed and at peace and you're just that feeling when you get done with a long run, or imagine feeling like that 24/7, 365. And I have that inside. And I just want to give that so what I'm striving for is to give that to as many people as possible.
Was there a singular moment that you went from not having that to having that?
No, it wasn't a singular moment.
A gradual expansion?
A gradual expansion over the past, from meeting Elle and really deepening that friendship from August, maybe it was July or August of 2023 to January, it's been deepening and deepening and deepening and deepening and deepening. And then I discovered the map of consciousness and it all went to a different level because I realized the work that I was doing was real. A lot of theoretical stuff. Okay, we're looking at my insecurity. I feel better. What's going on? And then you see a map, the map of consciousness. And you're like, oh my God, this is what I've been doing. And now I've got the map so I can see where I'm operating from. I could see where different things are operating from. I could put more loving things into my field of awareness. I could surround myself with more loving people. I could surround my body with more loving foods. So that was a real inflection point, discovering the map of consciousness, and the book on his map of consciousness explained by David Hawkins. And before that, it was this gradual building. But when I discovered it on December 23rd, 2023, it was all right, this is a whole new reality.
2 weeks before I met you in Austin. And then we briefly met. And then you were out here in January and you were a completely different person within those 3 weeks.
You could feel that.
Correct.
And you saw me in both spots and you're like, that's a different human who came in the door.
Correct.
And then what about today?
Completely different again.
That's interesting to note, right? Mm-hmm. As somebody who's seen me in 3 different places, what's going on there?
For someone listening, what is the map of consciousness?
The map of consciousness is a chart that shows different emotions and ranks different emotions on the scale from 0 to 1,000. At the lowest end, it's emotions like guilt, shame, fear, apathy. At the highest end, it's enlightenment, peace, joy, which is also unconditional love, and love itself. And in the middle are emotions like courage and reason and willingness. And the point is that David Hawkins has used muscle testing to point out these different emotions and then put numbers associated to them. And when I saw this map, I mean, you could just look at this map, and if something doesn't shift in you, I'd be surprised in any person. Because if you really sit with it, when you are acting in guilt and shame, how do you do anything? When you are operating from love and joy and peace, how easy is it to do everything? It's like, and I've experienced, and most humans have experienced what both of those feel like. And if you just live with that map in mind of like, from a place of love, am I doing this from joy? Am I doing this from peace? What is getting in the way of that? Make some real progress. And started living as if the map was true. And my life changed forever.
Once you start to believe it. Because so many people have created, there's the map of consciousness, and there's a bunch of different modalities and things that are all saying the same thing. It's kind of similar in a way to religion as well.
Absolutely.
Where while there are, and I'm not an expert on religion in the slightest, but the way that I perceive it is they're all looking to one higher entity or one energetic being or source energy, or you are source, or whatever it ends up being that is outside of you, yet working towards that thing, or working towards becoming closer to oneness with that place. Yet it causes so much discomfort in people, because if you subscribe to one belief and I subscribe to another, yet we're still practicing the same thing, but we have opposing points of view because my God's not your God.
Yeah.
Yet the map of consciousness, when you showed me, what's interesting is there's no divisiveness to it, because it's a state of being.
Chills.
Yeah. A state of being that allows you to quantify a state that before that you would have only been able to feel. And how do we then know if the feelings are aligned?
The reason why I got chills is because it was the first quote unquote religion that was giving truth not based on where you were raised. Like if you're raised in the United States and you're Christian, it's like, well, what about the Jewish tradition, right? Or what about the Chinese way of being? It's like in the map of consciousness, there exists a possibility for everyone who is human to live in this way. And it wasn't divisive based on religion. And it allowed me to be like, oh, all religions are correct. And they're all pointing to the same place of love and joy and peace. And they're all trying to get there in their own way. And I really saw the universality of what religions are trying to point to so desperately. And I felt like, wow, this is right.
I had a conversation with a friend, probably 5 or 6 years ago. He was my neighbor when I still lived in Arizona. And I invited, very devout Christian, and I invited him to come to a yoga class with me. And he said, no, I can't. It goes against my faith.
Remember you telling me the story.
And it stopped me in my tracks, because I was raised Christian, and I remember growing up, and the outcome or the goal or the thing that we were practicing Christianity to do was to come to peace and reach oneness. And then when I discovered yoga, that was a physical practice and a meditative practice that helped me get closer to that oneness, where I was praying and meditating all hand in hand. There wasn't a, this is right, this is wrong. And it was fascinating to me that that there was this conflicting belief that if I do this, I am against the belief that this is the right way to be. When praying is meditating and meditating is praying.
So true. And I posted about how meditation brought me closer to God. And I got a lot of comments and messages from Christians being like, how do I meditate? And is that okay as a Christian? And I understand where that's coming from. If it's getting someone closer to peace and it's not hurting anyone, it's like, that is the way. And I think when we get in these doctrines of you can only be like this, or you can only do this to get peace, or only this to feel joy, it's like, it should make us question.
Do you think meditation and prayer are the one and the same?
I don't think it's exactly the same. I mean, how I practice meditation is open awareness. So whatever floats into my mind is what I embrace and is what I look at, and anything can float into one's mind. Versus prayer, to me, feels more directed, and I do both. I love both.
The prayer is almost like a mantra style meditation.
Yeah, it can be. It's more intention focused. And
intention versus attention.
Yeah. Intention. I said a prayer before this podcast, and say a prayer before meals. Those are intentions. And then meditation for me is, where does my attention go? When nothing is present, where does your attention go? I think that's a very useful framing for human beings to think about. When nothing is present, what do you think about? That's very useful knowledge to have about oneself.
You find your baseline pretty quickly. What do you revert back to? Because what you look for is what you're going to find. And if your baseline is that of the negative, you're going to find more of that thing. But if your baseline is that of love, you're going to find more of that thing as well.
Yeah. So, very useful practice. Where does the mind go?
After you discovered the map of consciousness, what was your first step towards working to raise yours?
I think one significant moment happened 3 weeks after, which was I wrote a letter to my dad explaining to him all the things about him that I was previously not giving credit to him for. In my head, I had the story about my dad. He didn't give me what I needed as a child, and he was so, I didn't appreciate him. And like, is that true? Like, am I really putting this man down who tried his best and did so much for me and helped me and was a great role model? Like, I don't need to do that. And I also never told him all the things that I loved about him, that I appreciated from him, that I got from him, like my discipline and work ethic and ability to lead. So I wrote him a letter, and just doing that made me so much more free. There was also, I started to listen to different music. Starting in October, September, I started listening to a lot of Jack Johnson. And then November 16th, I recorded a podcast with Mike Posner. And I hadn't known or embodied the map of consciousness at this point. I mean, I've been aware of the map of consciousness for 2 years or 3 years, but living it versus just being aware of it is an entirely different thing. And so on November 16th, Mike Posner shared with me that the song called The Blessing transformed his life. And The Blessing, it's on YouTube. The YouTube version's amazing. And it's by Cody Carnes and Carrie Job, I think. I've listened to it thousands of times at this point. But listening to music like that and really being intentional with what are the people that are bringing me the most energy, who is living in love, the forgiveness piece of it was huge. And the writing a letter and bringing attention to all the things that I repressed about my dad is a practice that I hold for every human being, because I felt so much lighter after doing that.
Finding that freedom that you spoke about. It's the things, you said this before we jumped on today, it's finding the things in your life, this hit me, finding the things in your life that you can't fully authentically be yourself. And those are the areas that you are not currently free. And through that lens, those were things that you had repressed that didn't allow you to authentically be you, because it was a through line of resentment or anger or frustration or grief or whatever it ended up being. And it's interesting, all these conversations happen concurrently as we have been chatting this morning, because when we were running as well, we talked about how it wasn't until I embodied all of the dark or all of the pieces that I previously repressed that I actually felt myself step into more of who I was. And after I did that, I started to create stronger friendships and relationships. I started to attract more of the things I wanted into my life. I started to deepen the relationships I already had, because it wasn't just at this surface level, that I allowed people to see me to the 60% point. Anything past that, you're going to have to learn about the rest, and then pushed all of that away. In relation to this, and you speak on music specifically, how has your consumption changed since discovering Map of Consciousness, or since embodying Map of Consciousness?
I haven't listened to a podcast in months. And that's not because I think podcasts are wrong or bad. It's just that I find that a lot of it's coming from reason, which is around the level 400 in the map. And I find this music that I'm listening to is coming from 900 or 1,000. And so because of that, I'm living in the state of enlightenment, like living in the music that I'm consuming is enlightenment. And it feels that way. Like, you listen to The Blessing over and over and over again and tell me how you feel. And versus listening to my podcast. It's like, I'm going to guess that if you listen to The Blessing, you're going to feel more love and freedom than you would my podcast. I'm guessing. And so if you want to listen to a podcast, great. I appreciate that. And I'm honored that people listen. And it's not anything against podcasts. I just feel like the music's tapping into something transcendent that podcasts have a difficulty to tap into the same thing.
I think I agree, because I think music comes through. And I think there's very few conversations. I can say that I have had conversations where I felt things came through.
Yeah.
And those moments, I say, are few and far between. I wouldn't like them to be, but I can recall the moments when those things happen, and then this comes through you. Yet, from a musical perspective, because I played music my entire life, and it's something I would like to get back into deeper. And there's a state that you get to when you're playing music that is not you playing. It is, you are the vessel for that engagement, whatever it is, that energy to flow through you. And I think of it very similarly as like a devotion, because when you are meditating, when you are praying, when you are playing music, when you are running, when you are doing something that is, it's the extra 20%. That's what it is.
It's all connected. Explain the extra 20%.
So we were talking earlier today that I'm very good at going from 0 to 80, and I like novelty. And when I get to 80, I say, I've done the thing, I'm going to go do something else. But the mastery comes from going from 80 to 20. And in this similar thread,
80 to 100.
80 to 100, the last 20%, yes. And in this similar thread, that last 20% is where you get to the place of allowing things to flow through, because you're no longer conscious of the thing. It's unconscious competence. It's the final edge of the spectrum that allows you to exist and be in what it is that you're doing. I would also say this is one of my favorite things in the world is to watch, it doesn't have to be a musician, but it's the best way to analogize it, is to watch a musician in a solo. Because they are so fucking present that nothing else exists. And there are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people watching them, mesmerized by them on stage. And the reason that they want to, and the reason I would love to be a performing musician, I think there are a lot of people in the world that also idolize people like that and celebrities like that because they gave themselves permission to allow energy to flow through rather than to judge themselves for what they think is right or wrong.
And I think that the best conversations feel like that. And so when my friends Talia and Elle, we record a podcast, someone says, this feels like a psychedelic trip. Like that's just because truth is flowing through us. And if you listen to my episode of Mike Poser, it's the same way. It feels like something greater is happening. And so it's not to put down podcast, and conversations absolutely can feel like that, but it just requires two people to be really present to the creation of what's happening and have complete just feeling of no ego and just pure presence and all the things that we do, or attempt to do.
There's awareness that comes with it too. I credit podcasts for creating a level of awareness that has allowed me to get to a place where I've expanded into this reflective place. Is there a way to skip steps?
Yeah, I think so. Like skip different levels of the map, on the map. I think so. I've seen people jump from 250 to 510, 520 over the course of a month. So maybe they embodied that state for a 250 would be neutrality. And they go from neutrality to love in 2 months. The whole world is different. How they're viewing things, how they're relating to everything is different. And I would assume that in that, they just went from one to another. I mean, Eckhart Tolle talks about it's almost instant enlightenment, waking up one day. I think it's possible. I don't know what makes that happen.
What would transpire to get to that point?
Right. Where you just wake up and you're like, yep, that's it. I see oneness everywhere. I am oneness. I am connected. I am.
I've viewed, to preface, I don't think trauma exists. I think trauma is a point in time that you attach to in order to give yourself permission to feel a certain way. And I think trauma is one of the biggest blessings we've been given because it allows you to pinpoint a specific moment in time that is a catalyst for action for you. I've had conversations with friends that have had, for all intents and purposes, very privileged upbringings. And they're like, I don't know why I am the way that I am. And then I've also had conversations with friends who have had horrible upbringings and have had very traumatic things happen to them. And I often see them as being lighter, stronger, more fulfilled individuals than the ones who had everything given to them from the first place. And that's why I think problems are the pressure we push against that allow us to craft our character. And a life devoid of problems isn't really a life at all because you don't end up getting the opportunity to expand into who you were meant to become. In that same lens, I think trauma has become a societally acceptable word and way to define a lack of I don't want to say a lack of, but a reason why you're not where you think you should be. Because should is irrelevant. And what's meant for you is coming to you. It's just not on the timeline that you think it was meant to happen. I'd be curious to get your take on trauma itself. Because I think we both believe and subscribe that things are happening for us. But do you see trauma as being a catalyst for action or something that prevents you from getting to the place that's meant for you?
I think trauma is the thing that you felt like you didn't get, that you felt like you needed. And that actually is your reason for being on this planet. So,
explain that further.
Sure. So, for me, I'll just speak from personal experience. What was my trauma? What was the thing that I didn't feel like I got that became the thing that I'm actually here to give? Through working with Talia in a friendship, she basically coached me to this way of being, and L, both of them. I uncovered that the thing that I felt like I lacked, which was not actually true in practicality, in full totality, but I felt like it was, I felt like I lacked emotional guidance from a masculine role model. Now, I could have gone to my dad anytime and been like, Dad, I'm struggling with this with girls. I want your help understanding this. And he would have worked through it with me to the best of his abilities. Could have gone to my grandpa, said the same thing, and he would ask me questions. My 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old brain, 18, 19, 20, I could not. They would have made fun of me. They would have judged me. They would have all of that. That was my trauma. Now, what does that lead me to do at 24? At 24, I start meditating. At 25, I dive deeper into my emotions and how to help people, and specifically men. 25, I start the podcast, and from 25 to 28, 80 or 90% of the guests are men. You think it's just because I like men more than women? No, it's because I felt like I didn't get emotional guidance from a male role model. So I started to help men be more emotionally intelligent without being consciously aware of that. And then from working with Talia and Elle, I uncover, oh, you felt like you lacked this as a child. What you felt like you lacked is your trauma. And that's actually your greatest gift. I can sit here today, understand my emotions. The map of consciousness is a way to detail your emotions so that you could understand them better. And now that is my gift. That is what I help men primarily with. That's what I help uncover with them to get to a place of more love and freedom. So that's how I view trauma. And I think that is the case for every human being who is existing. I think there's no person alive had the upbringing of perfection. I think that will always feel like you lack something. Even if you did it, you'll feel like you did. And that feeling of lack will actually create your greatest gift.
Where does someone find that a feeling of lack? Because it's one thing to say in retrospect, this is where I felt lack. But in the moment, for me, it was much more challenging to actually pinpoint that area where I felt like I was lacking.
Yeah, I mean, Talia did this amazing exercise on episode 454 of the podcast, which I've done at my retreats and will continue to do. And you go into a meditation and visualization, and you can listen to it on episode 454. And it's actually really a difficult question to ask people. What do you feel like you lacked as a child? I was in an Uber 3 months ago, in the last couple of months rather. And I asked the guy, what did you feel like you lacked as a child? And silence for the next minute. He never thought about that. And most people don't think about that. But if you really think about your resentments, if you really think about your judgments, if you really think about the places that you are mad at yourself, you can get to that thing that you lacked. Because otherwise you would just be in a place of pure love. If you feel like you didn't lack anything. But you're judging something or you're resentful towards something, that points to your lack.
You recently had on Diego Perez
Yes.
in Pueblo. And he has a quote that says, "I was never addicted to one thing. I was addicted to feeling a void within myself with things other than my own love." And that makes me think about this feeling of lack is you trying to find things that aren't you, to feel something you felt you missed out on. Therefore, the trauma that you perceive is something that was created because you didn't love yourself fully. So then the ultimate goal is to get back to a place of whole acceptance of the self.
Yes. And how I believe you do that is by giving the thing that you felt like you lacked. And that is the most transcendent way of being.
The secret to living is giving.
Giving the thing that you felt like you didn't get. Specifically, I was looking for Alex Hormozy to be the father figure emotionally, and Peter Crone, I was more nervous to talk to Peter Crone than any other person that I had spoke to. Why? Because he was an example of the emotionally intelligent father figure that I, in my head, wished I got. And when I recognized that I was trying to receive it from him, this is by virtue of Elle helping me, Elle Beecher helping me with this amazing insight of like, why were you slightly different in this episode? Like, oh, because I wanted his love and validation. If he said that I was amazing, that would mean that my dad would say I was amazing. And making that realization helped me be like, oh, I don't need that. And then the next episode I recorded after that realization was with Mike Posner, somebody I would have put on a pedestal in that same way. Life has a hilarious way of working. And the episode was phenomenal from a place of pureness and a place of clarity and a place of, I don't need this guy to love me for me to love myself. And that allowed us to help show other men how to love themselves deeper. And that showed other men how to be more emotionally intelligent. So because I wasn't seeking it from him, I could then help other human beings. And that is a deeper manifestation of love. And that's a deeper manifestation of my reason for being.
The way wasn't around, but through. Because when that was put there to give you that lesson, to see that I was searching for validation in a father figure, once I recognized that that wasn't going to fulfill me the way that I was meant to, allowed you then to show up fully and authentically for the next, which then gave you the next lesson, which was your episode with Posner.
Which then brought me to the blessing, right? So I have this belief that we will continue to be faced with the same problem over and over again until we solve it and tell the truth and find out the truth in a way that we previously have not recognized. I was doing that with Andy Frisella in episode 346. I was doing that with Peter Crone in episode 377. It's like, I did that with Gary Vaynerchuk in episode 39. I was going to keep facing that problem over and over and over again until I recognized that I was putting these people on a pedestal. And why was I putting them on a pedestal? Was because I actually was seeking the very thing from them that was my gift to give.
And it was always men because of your father.
Correct. And let the record show, my father was amazing. Like, and this is the hard part about having amazing parents, is you start, one trick you can play with yourself is, my childhood was great. My parents gave me everything I needed. They loved me fully, and my dad came to Little League games, and my dad and mom are still together to this day, and my dad provided financially, and he provided, like he was there at dinner every night, and he there, and my mom did the absolute best she could emotionally, and she's such an amazing, emotionally intelligent woman. It's like, I got everything. And I still created this story that was true to my experience, wasn't true in totality, but it did help give me so much of my gifts. And that is.
It was your reality rather than the actuality of the experience.
Correct. You have these amazing one-liners.
I've found ways to articulate the world that make sense for me, that when I'm confronted with situations, it's pattern recognition in my own head. And I mean, you know me well enough to know that I'm very system oriented in a lot of things that I do. And the pattern recognition gives me a moment in time or a thing to double click on. And when I can double click on it, I can excavate it and expand into it and then figure out where these pieces come from and then come up with something that makes sense for me to navigate it in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. It was my reality, not actuality. And that doesn't discount your reality, even if it wasn't truth in totality.
Correct.
So it's a useful exercise. For some people, it's obvious. I didn't get what I needed in this way or this way. Some people, and especially for people who had a good childhood, it might take some more digging, but it's there. Otherwise, like we all have it. We all have a reason for being. We all have a need that we felt like we needed that we didn't get. So definitely spend time doing that exercise on episode 454.
Talk to me about your new relationship.
I mean, if you want to dive deeper into why I am different today versus January when I stayed with you, it's a lot of it is due to spending time with this incredible woman. I really hold a vision in my head for everybody to experience what I'm experiencing right now, which is complete connection with another human soul, body, mind, and spirit. And this feeling of, I am so grateful to be in her presence. She is so grateful to be in mine. It is so much love and joy and peace pouring out of her in every moment. Every moment is better with her being in it. And I've never experienced something like this to this level before. And I just feel grateful to be able to witness it. Witness it on full, like, what is happening? So, just an amazing bright light.
Do you attribute that connection? I know we spoke about this a little bit before, but do you attribute that connection to her as an individual or to the expansion that you've done within yourself to get to the point where you can see her for who she is?
Both. I mean, I wrote that letter to my dad on January 13th, and I wrote a letter to my future wife on the same day, later that day, January 13th. And I meet Sloan on January 27th. And that's no coincidence. I was ready to meet this woman at this time. What a blessing.
When does your future wife get the letter?
Oh, I read it to her I read it to her immediately. She wrote one to me.
Really?
That wasn't addressed directly to me, but we exchanged the first night I came over after meeting her, night 1. On night 2, she reads me the letter that she wrote on Friday about her future partner. And it was describing me exactly as I am. And for me, it was describing her 95% of who she is.
Do you think that exists for everyone? That level of connection and that person out there?
I hold it for everyone. I don't know, but I pray that every person gets to experience that. It is the most magical thing, man. It really is. And I really believe our love will transform people when it's really put on display. I mean, the first night I met her, one person said, I broke up with my boyfriend. This is in a completely platonic, me and her. I'll explain the full situation so people can get context for it. So, went to a plant medicine ceremony on January 26th. And it was a group setting. And my mantra for the ceremony was, I love you, God. I love you, God. I love you, God. I love you, God. And then at some point, I love you, God turns into, I love you, Jessica. I love you, Jessica. I love you. It's like, see, there's a white light. I'm like, who is Jessica? It's like, that's your future wife. Great. The next day, is another plant medicine ceremony. And woman crawls over to me, and I start telling her about this vision that I had the night before. She's like, "That's so amazing. I'm so happy for you." And I said, "Wait, your name used to be Jessica." It's like, what? What's your name now? Like, my name is Sloan. Sloan happens to be my mother's maiden name. And what happened the first night was, it was platonic, but there was an undercurrent of sexual chemistry, but it was so clean. And people were witnessing us in that first night communicate with each other. A woman breaks up with her boyfriend from just watching us. Another woman says, "I realized in that moment what love is actually like. This is like, we're not kissing, we're just cuddling and connecting as human beings." Another woman says, "Oh, you've met your soulmate," to both of us. Happening, right? And so I say all that to say that I genuinely think that we were placed in each other's lives to expand love and freedom in the world through relationships. And I don't know how exactly that's going to manifest, but I'm really excited to find out, because the past 3 months has been a journey of it in and of itself, and grateful for that.
The how is much less important than the why. I from a relational perspective, because I would say I've felt moments of that before. And the times that it goes away is because I prevent myself from stepping deeper into that feeling. As you've navigated this new relationship, what are some of the tools or systems or inputs that you've used to continually revert back to the baseline of love and build upon that strong foundation?
I think it's such a good question. The most important one is that whenever either one of us goes into the lower states being shame, guilt, fear, anger, desire, point it out in each other. And we're comfortable saying, "I think this is something that this is your stuff that you need to work on. This is your past that's coming into this moment." And we both are open enough to want to hear where we are not free. And so the most important thing is there's a feeling of bring me anything you see for how I'm showing up. Because my intention fully is to love myself and to love you and love this relationship and bring it the most peace and the most joy. And so if anything I'm doing is not that, let's talk about it. I mean, even last night, it's like I crossed my arms and we were talking, and she's like, "I felt something from you that I've never felt before," which is like, you were trying not to win that argument. You were trying not to connect with me. You're trying to win that argument. It's like, you're right. I was. And this is where I think it comes from. And that happened from the moment she recognized it to the moment where I admitted that that was a truth. It was maybe 10 minutes. If we didn't look at that, if she suppressed that part of herself, it continues. It builds in the background. So just this openness has been the biggest system that we've cultivated, and saying we'd rather say the truth that is difficult for you to hear than for me to suppress it.
Which is a testament to the work that you've done previous and the work she's done previous. And then you meet at this communal place where you are now operating on a similar conscious level.
Yes. It's so pervasive. Like, I didn't even realize when my arms were crossed that I was getting mad. I didn't realize where that was coming from. I thought I was trying to get to the truth. But she has such a strong depth of emotion and feeling. She could feel, oh, this energy is completely different. And then she said, okay. Like, she accepted what I was saying, and I was like, why do I feel bad now? Why do I feel like I feel her energy of shutting down? I was like, okay, we need to look at that. Like, where am I showing up? Because we're constantly operating this place of love and joy. When it's not that, it's very clear. And we know that something has been said or something came into the dynamic that doesn't exist.
How do you speak that truth more frequently? Because that's a very challenging thing to do in the moment, catch yourself and speak the thing then and there.
Both meditate. And we also...
It's cultivating that awareness of yourself so that you know when things are altered within yourself.
Yeah. And I will also say, she's really good at follow-ups. So the next day or in the next interaction, she'll come back and be like, when you said this, what exactly did this mean? And I really enjoy that because I'm open to her questions. And I love how when we're in a different state, like we could have this interaction. And then if I were to point out in the moment, when you did this, it made me feel like this. That's a whole different thing than if we're not in this moment for me to say and bring that to you. Because now you're less attached to the version of you that was acting that way. And so I think at the best, it's done where maybe it is in that moment, but also it's amazing if it's not and it's slightly after because you have less attachment.
You've regulated yourself and then you've come back to a place of equanimity and then you approach the conversation on this equitable level.
Yeah. And so I think she does that really well. And that is amazing to experience because I get to hear all of her perspectives and I know she's thinking about the things that have happened and what has been said in the background, which I love because it shows that she's caring about the relationship, she's caring about what I say. But I think if you constantly sit with yourself with what about this person, be it a friend or a partner, what about them didn't I like in this interaction? Or what about this stuck out? And then bringing that to their attention after is a useful practice. And it doesn't have to be in the negative. It could be, hey, I really loved when you made me food. I really love, and just saying that to someone after reinforces that behavior, but also like makes them know that you're thinking about them even when you're not there with them.
At what point, I love viewing everything as a problem as an opportunity for growth and an opportunity to provide a lesson. At what point or how do you differentiate between what is a problem presenting itself as a lesson for you to grow and something you should distance yourself from?
I think when the values don't align, if it's a person in a relationship, if the values don't align, if there's not a shared vision, there's not respect, if there's not trust, someone does something that breaks your trust and doesn't own up to why they did that, I think somebody who is operating from a different plane of reality, it's a feeling. It's an intuition of there's something about this person that I don't want to grow with. And that's true for friends and that's true for partners as well. And I tap into that a lot. What am I growing with? Who's giving me energy? Who's coming at me with new perspectives or new joy or new love or new peace? And how can I spend more time with them?
I had a friend stay with us a couple weeks ago, and he knows Leah as well. And it was interesting in conversation, it came up where how I spoke about her when we initially met was through the lens of collaboration, and how I speak about her now is through the lens of partnership. And he goes, in my understanding, in my belief, how I view this thing is a collaboration is like an independent contractor, and partnership is like a business partner. And on one side, you hire someone to do a job. It's transactional. Once it's done, then it's over with. But a partnership is someone that when shit hits the fan, you have to find a way to then grow with, work through, expand into. I don't think work through is right. We spoke earlier, but I think expanding into that is the correct reframe. And with her, it was the first time in my life that I've viewed someone as I don't need to have all the answers, because I know there will be moments where I have right and wrong, but it's learning to recognize and understand and respect a difference in opinion and a difference of viewpoint from a level that allows me to present who I am authentically, like the freedom piece. Showing up in your life where you're actually free and allowing yourself to be that way, because whether you know or not, you accept yourself for who you are, because you can't do the wrong thing for the right person. I think you can intentionally sabotage, obviously, but I think that if you are authentically you, if it's the right person, you can't fuck that up. Taking a quick break from this episode to remind you that your inputs matter. This show was designed and created to help you build a high-performing, healthy, wealthy life. So if you feel that you're getting value from this episode, please go ahead and share it with someone that you feel would get value as well. Now, fun fact, 90% of listeners of this show are not actually subscribed to the podcast. So if you would take a moment and go ahead and tap the subscribe button, it would mean the world to me. Thank you so much for being here. Now back to the show. In that same lens, and in that same line of thinking, if this is going to come out eventually, and I prevent it from happening now, or I limit myself from showing up authentically presently, you're either A, going to get to a place where it all bubbles to the surface and explodes, and then that leads to a divorce or something that's extremely messy, or you find a way to tell the truth presently, and in doing so, sure, there's a minor argument, but the argument or disagreement or looking at things through an alternate perspective is much, much smaller than as if you let this extend over days, weeks, months, years, decades. In line with Tell the Truth, your first book, coming out 8/8/2024, which is 888, why did you pick a date for the release prior to the book being completed?
Because it was good accountability. And I'll be stepping into my 29th year on July 13th. Felt like the appropriate time. Felt like, all right, this is the year of eights. The year of 8 with 2024. So August 8th makes sense. It wasn't overthinking. It was just, this is what I feel.
What happens if the book isn't completed by then? Do you release as is?
Yeah, there's no reality in which I won't release something on August 8th. Even if that's a Kindle version only. I'm just sure of that completely.
So walk me through Tell the Truth.
I realized that the feeling that I have inside of complete peace, of life is credible. And I know it's from within, and because I just told the truth over and over and over again and was willing to own it in so many different contexts. Can you imagine? I mean, I know there's a version of me from the past that feels that way about my dad, but is scared to say it. I know there's a version of me that looks at Peter Crone and is like, okay, I was nervous around him, but I don't want to tell anyone that. What would happen if you just told the truth? What would happen if you met a woman and you fell madly in love with her in the first week and told her in the first week, I love you, coming from the place of pure, I actually love you. I don't want anything from you. This is just how I'm feeling. What would happen if you met a woman and you wrote her a love letter because that's what you felt was the moment called for, which I'd done for women that I didn't end up with. That got me to a new situation. So I've noticed all of the places in which I've told the truth, and every time I have, the truth that was difficult to tell, it's led me to a more expanded version of myself. And we all know those moments in our lives when we are getting the same problem over and over and over again. Because there's a truth you're not seeing or you're not telling. And I want humans to grow. I want consciousness to expand. I know the thing that has expanded my own consciousness the most is telling and owning the truth as I presently and currently understand it. That doesn't mean that it is the total truth in totality, but it means this is what I'm feeling and this is what I'm experiencing. And I want to let you know that so that I can grow and you can grow too, because you will have more information and knowledge.
So I think in listening to you speak about this, I think the biggest input in your life that has gotten you to the place that you're at today is telling the truth. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
As an actionable way, I don't know if this is possible, but let's see. As an actionable way for someone listening to go deeper into telling the truth, what is a action system, something around those lines that has allowed you to tell the truth and show up more authentically in every moment of your life?
Asking myself, what's the conversation I'm avoiding? If you just walk around life, what am I nervous about right now? If somebody found this out about me, dissect. If this was on the front page of the paper tomorrow morning, if I was on Joe Rogan tomorrow and he asked me about this, how would I feel? That's your place to tell the truth. So look for the place you're avoiding and look for the place where you want the least amount of people to know about that situation.
And dive deep.
And dive deep and say it. Because what you're holding on to is this feeling of no one knows this about me and I'm comfortable in that. Versus, what would it look like if there was no secrets? What would it look like if you were completely at peace with everything you've done and who you are today?
In line with freedom too, the things that you fear are the things that you wouldn't want people to know about you. And in those moments, you can ask yourself, or I've asked myself, whose opinion do I care about more, or what opinion do I care more than my own in this moment? Because that is then where the fear stems from. Because the fear is coming from me caring more about an external opinion of an action or choice or thing that I've done or experienced in my past that maybe I'm not proud of, but it's also been something that's protected and propelled me towards where I'm at today. So you can't look at it through this lens of negativity or this lens of I wish it didn't happen, because then it's just you judging yourself. But if you remove, like you said, the judgment of yourself and you allow yourself to tell the truth about who you are and why you are the way you are, everything else is deemed irrelevant.
Thing that if we did more of, would be more whole as a society. But forget the society piece, we'd be more whole as a human being. The more that we live in and embody the truth. The reason why some people are 90 years old, resentful, angry, fearful, there's some truth that they're avoiding, that they don't want to say. They fear that it's going to make someone upset. That something that happened to them that they're still holding resentment towards. Or cancer. And telling the truth about how you feel angry at someone gets you to a new state. That when we are living in courage, courage is the key point on the map of consciousness. Because you can't tell the truth unless you're in courage. You have to have the courage to speak, the courage to recognize, the courage to say, yep, this is my life. From that place, that's the place you can grow from. When I went to the gym for the first time, I was so scared what people would think of me. Scrawny 140-pound kid, and I'm going to be so weak. And I had the courage and found the courage to go. And how do you find the courage? Sometimes it requires someone to believe in you before you believe in yourself. They say, I see your potential. I see what you're capable of. Though you're 140 pounds right now, be strong someday. Sometimes it takes someone else's belief in you before you believe in yourself. That can give you the courage. And so that's why podcasts are so great. It's because you can see people who have done the thing of having courage for themselves in different aspects of their life. You could embody that. Joe Rogan too in this situation. What would David Goggins do? That gives you a new perspective for your own life. Okay, if he did this, then I could go to my first jiu-jitsu class. I could be a beginner. If Joe Rogan is still talking about stand-up comedy in the same way and he's still writing jokes and he's still learning, I could still learn today. I mean, I started my podcast, started doing 3 episodes a week because I said to myself, what did Joe Rogan do? What has he done for the past 10 years? He's done 3 podcast episodes a week. So if he did that, then I can do the same thing right now. I could have the courage to act how he acted. So I think it's really important to think about. It's like, where can you add a little more courage to your life? Where you're operating in fear, anxiety, shame, guilt, pride, shift that to courage.
Because all the people we look up to had courage to do the thing. That's the only reason they're notable. That's the only reason they're in a position that you know their name is because at one point in their life, they had the courage to say, I'm going to do this thing differently.
And if you're listening to this podcast at this point, someone is listening, and it's like, you've got the courage to want a better life for yourself, which for a lot of human beings is something that they don't have. David Hawkins says that 80% or 85% of the world population is operating below 200. 85% of the world population is operating below courage as their general ethos and way of being. But you're listening to this, right? You have courage to want a better life for yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made it this far in the podcast. So ask yourself, where in my life don't I have courage? Is it asking out a girl? That was a huge thing for me. Even, I would say on October 7th of 2023, it was a woman at the grocery store checking out my bags. And I was like, wow, I'd really love to ask that girl for a number. And I didn't have the courage in that moment to do that. And then on October 9th, a couple of days later, like the next time I see her, I'm going to ask her. And I got her number and I texted her. She never texted me back. And I felt so good. So good. This feeling of like, wow, I had the courage to do something that previously I didn't have the courage to do. And so in most areas of my life, I did have a lot of courage and I was acting courageously. But there was still that one facet where I didn't have the courage to go up to a random woman and ask her for a number. And I did. And then I realized, oh, wow, that's no big deal at all. And so I guess the invitation is, where in your life are you not acting in courage? Because that's a place you're not free. And that's a place that may be holding back every part of your life. If I didn't have the courage to ask that woman for her phone number in October of 2023, would I have met Sloan in January of 2024? No. But my belief is that by telling the truth about what I felt and asking for a number, that unlocked a new situation to unfold that gave me a new problem, a new opportunity for growth that eventually brought in the woman I'm completely in love with.
Danny, it's been an absolute pleasure to not only get to spend the morning with you, but to get to know you a little bit better over these past couple months here. And I remember probably about a year ago listening to a few podcast eps of yours. And then when I connected with Bobby Obert and I said I was coming to Austin for that trip, I was like, hey, if Danny's around, like, invite him out. And I don't know if the comedy show was planned prior to that or if that wasn't, but I'm incredibly grateful that we were able to connect and develop a relationship over the past couple months. And I've seen how you navigate the world and how you continue to expand and grow into that navigation, and you allow life to flow and pivot and allow yourself to experience all of it and not just a piece. And that's been something I've taken a lot from and learned a lot from. So thank you for that. And thank you for being on today.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for doing this. I know I've hosted so many of these podcasts that myself, I know someone who does preparation, someone who's present, and you are absolutely that, man. You're such a special guy and such a special friend to me, because somebody who's willing to run 100 miles, first of all, is pretty wild and pretty incredible of a human being. Not many people can say that they've done that. But even more than that, I appreciate how committed you are to your growth and how committed you are into being the best you possibly can on this floating rock in space. And that comes through in every action you take. That came through in this podcast. That came through in our run. That comes through in just who you are. And I think everybody is better off having friends like that in their life. So thank you so much for being you. And I'm so grateful and honored to be your friend.